fathers, my brothers, I lift up my voice and raise it high, telling the stories of your children's cries. For our ability to survive the onslaught of the enemy's drugs, guns, and alcohol, his prisons and his killing fields, depends directly on whether you are willing to stand up and resist the outrages that are being heaped upon us as a people and build a new society. Yes, the task is difficult. The odds are against you. But you must organize to find a way or make your own way.
Go ahead, brother.
You must change today so that tomorrow may dare to be different. And when you have fought back and regained your pride, when you have won some battles, when you are able to tell the stories of your heroism, when you can pass on to your young the tradition of struggle through examples of your having stood up for a better tomorrow, when you take control of our institutions, our media, our schools, when you maximize our economic resources towards our own benefits, when you stop making excuses, when you start standing with our mothers, when you stick it out with your families, when you start mentoring our young, when you start teaching us to be humane, then we can build a new nation of strong people. Your sons and daughters will no longer need to belong to gangs because they do belong. Our youth will no longer be seeking drugs as an escape because they would have outlets in our society to develop themselves. When you start setting the conditions for our youth to fulfill their humanities, then we will not be in despair. We will be whole, complete, and hopeful. My fathers, you must shape the vision of tomorrow. But in order for that vision to become a reality, you must rededicate yourself to a new beginning. Go back to your families. Go raise and teach your children. Go back and organize throughout this nation to bring about a better day for our people. Our enemies can destroy us one by one, but no one can stop 1 million men organized and committed. Thank you.
For Prudential life insurance statistician Frederick Hoffman, those differences could lead to only one fate for African Americans. In Vital Capacity, he wrote, "The tendency of the Negro race has been downward. This tendency must lead to a still greater mortality, and in the end, cause the extinction of the race." Hoffman's Race Traits and Tendencies of the American Negro was published in 1896, the same year the Supreme Court legalized segregation. It was one of the most influential publications of its day.
What's interesting is that it resonated in the minds of so many other social observers of the time, the extinction thesis. It fit into their notions of how races become ascendant in the world. They looked at other groups of people in various stages beneath them as approaching the completely civilized stage.
Hoffman presented his statistical data as unimpeachable science. He compared rates of death and disease between African Americans and whites, and, not surprisingly, found enormous disparities. But his data analysis was flawed. He ignored the insidious effects of poverty and social neglect on health. In contrast to today's belief in black physical superiority, Hoffman concluded that African Americans were innately infirm. As such, attempts to improve their housing, health, and education would be futile. Their extinction was inevitable, encoded in their blood.
I'm here and ready to go today, this evening on this 15th day of July. I mean, God is going fast. However, I will be an empty nester real soon. I'm happy. Okay, let's get going with our program this evening. Our lesson this evening is breaking generational curses in a changing world order. And brothers and sisters, I want to start off with a question. And this question is, who is going to tell us the truth? These are some very serious questions. And it's a very serious times we are living in which will set the stage for the next 500 years. Who's going to tell us the truth? Are you waiting on a November election, a November vote, thinking that relief is going to come once Trump is gone or weakened or his ilk is taken out of power? There probably will not be an election. They're setting it up right now, so there's probably not even going to be an election, or at least an election worth having any confidence in. And even if Trump and his ilk are removed, one worse is coming behind Donald Trump and his ilk. But who's going to tell us the truth? Who's going to tell us the truth? The society can no longer afford you. And I'm talking about you. The society can no longer afford you. There are not enough jobs available to support their own people, let alone you. The degrees we have earned, for the most part, are useless under the current model to help us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, as it were. And even if jobs are there, they call for the goodwill of others, which we no longer have because of the perception of horror culture and YN culture. The black church is filled with women who are kept asleep by useless platitudes, hopes of rapture, and faith in a system that has outlived its usefulness as a people development institution. It really has. It has outlived its usefulness as a system with the power and viability to develop people. The healthcare system use us as guinea pigs and trial rats to develop a system that does nothing more than treat the symptoms of the sicknesses that the food industry caused with its chemicalized imitation food. So you can pray all you want before eating it. And we see now that church folk are no healthier than people outside the church, even though they pray over their food. Well, there was a gentleman back in the 50s and 30s through the 50s named Elijah Muhammad. He was a Muslim, and I grew up in Detroit, so I saw those Muslims all over the place, and I interacted with Muslims quite a bit. I even taught at a Muslim school, taught physics and pre-calculus at a Muslim school in Dearborn. But Elijah Muhammad was a black Muslim, and in the spirit of Moses, he warned our parents, or I should say our grandparents, and wrote a food prescription for them in a book entitled How to Eat to Live. But our grandparents, I remember the old folks who were Christians and Baptists and Church of God in Christ and Pentecostal and all the churches. They said that, they told our grandparents to ignore him, opting to pray to the slave god rather than follow science and learn how to eat to live, because they had a slave diet. So now look at our condition. He warned us what was coming. And so my question is today, kind of introducing the subject, you want to still use that model? You want to still use that model? Our children have had no psychological relief from the endless stream of murder with their faces on the killer and the killed. In other words, they're seeing us killing each other, and it's causing trauma to our children, even if they're not in the midst of it, because they see it on the news, they hear about it all the time, they're talking about all the killings, and they're seeing a black face killing a black face. And this is causing psychological trauma. Now I'm talking about breaking generational curses in a changing world order, but I'm laying a foundation for you. And I'm willing to wager that every person that listens to this podcast has someone in their family who was murdered, or know a close individual who was murdered. I'm willing to bet you that everybody listening to this podcast can say, yes, someone I know, someone in my family was murdered. And so no relief from the psychological impact that's inflicted on our children, no help from the impact of COVID. We just left out of COVID and, put them back there, let them go back to school, and we're seeing the results of the COVID epidemic or COVID pandemic, but no one is addressing our children. The fear of being victim of someone coming up in their schools with an instrument of death and unaliving them is causing trauma. It's causing trauma in the children. They are doing drills to make sure that many of them can live if some crazed person come up into the school with an instrument of death and unalive them. No relief from the impact of broken homes, because the psychology does not work. We got all these psychologists, but it doesn't work. No relief from the impact of our broken homes, and the baby mama drama, and the baby daddy drama, and the squabbling, and the fighting, and the community disorganization, the conditions throughout much of the country. Our communities look about the same. The insufficient education that was not designed to address us and our children's educational needs. It was not designed for us. An education model is a model that's designed for the people that it serves. And so, since it was not designed for us and it's being implemented among us, we see that it does not have the ability to civilize us to any great degree. The hidden economic sanctions that remain unspoken by those in leadership, the deceptive political system which rewards deceit, elevates stupidity, and punishes high-level thinking and innovation. And while we squabble over 50-50 and engage in a stupid gender war, we are headed for extinction. And so if you're just now joining me, go back to the beginning. If you're listening to the rebroadcast, go back to the beginning and listen to the clip I played that where the research was done in 1886 and predicted these times that we're in right now. And there are those who know this but are not telling. So who's going to tell us the truth? There must be a better way, brothers and sisters. But who's going to tell us the truth? So my subject today is breaking generational curses in a changing world order. And today is going to be laying the foundation. And then on Sunday, I'm going to do an analysis of the Willie Lynch letter to help you see, to really give you the impact of how deep this has been embedded, and that we can no longer sit back and super analyze the stuff and not doing much about it. So Sunday, I'm going to go over the Willie Lynch letter so you can see the process that was implemented among our forefathers to bring us to this condition. And then hopefully I'll have enough time to actually lay out some simple things we can do to really turn the page. So I played that clip at the beginning for you concerning the book that was written in 1896 by a Prudential life insurance company statistician, Frederick Ludwig Hoffman. And this book, entitled Race, Traits, and Tendencies of the American Negro, and that's who we're discussing. We're discussing the American Negro, the one who was here at the Revolutionary War, the one who is here when the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were ratified, who those amendments addressed. I'm talking about them. So in 1896, a statistician studied our forefathers. And to refresh your memory before I go into that, Prudential Life Insurance Company was one of the biggest life insurance companies that financed and insured slaves as well as the slave ships. They insured the cargo. New York Life was another one. Lords of London was another one. Aetna Insurance was another one. Some of the largest insurance companies today were the insurance companies that insured the slave cargo as well as the slave ships. And so isn't it a wonder that we are doing business with them and not getting anything from it, though we are the offspring of those who brought the value to those companies. So a life insurance statistician is commonly known as an actuary, and he's a financial professional who analyzes mortality rates and health data and economic trends to evaluate risk for insurance companies. And they use probability and statistics to price life insurance policies for you. So your life insurance policy that you have on yourself, they actually have an idea how many people in your group, your location, your wherever you happen to be, your lifestyle will die, and they base the rates on that. And so an actuary is someone like Mr. Hoffman was, who wrote this book that studied those numbers and produced the rates for the insurance company. So Mr. Hoffman, who wrote the book, knowing the condition that existed as a result of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and our forefathers' health condition, concluded that the best thing, now listen to me good, he concluded that the best thing for the Negro was to leave him alone and let him go extinct. Hoffman knew that the country had no more use for the Negro. This was couched in the term the Negro problem, which every generation has dealt with over the course of the nation. And there were many, many books that was written on this subject. There was We Charge Genocide was written on that subject, and it was an attempt to take the genocide of the Negro to the United Nations. And you can get that book, We Charge Genocide, off of Amazon. And then there's another one that followed up on that, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. And this outlined from their own works and own writing the participation in the slave trade and the participation in a whole lot of things that we have been manipulated by. But there are those brothers and sisters who think in terms of centuries, while we think in terms of next Friday or retirement age. So my subject is breaking generational and family curses in a changing world order, because the experience has placed these curses in our family and in our group. And so the emerging authoritarian system that you see in the current political climate, the war on behalf of Israel as the American people suffer and die, the economic downturn in our economy that is not going to recover at all, they all herald the changing world order. That's what that heralds, a changing world order. And this is not a guess on my part. There's been plenty of studies done and documentation published by people like Ray Dalio, who wrote his books, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, and he showed the patterns and the cycles, the debt cycles, and how the world order changed and how you can see it changing, and even give some predictions to it. So he wrote Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. There was Martin Jacot, who wrote in 2009, When China Rules the World. And he also talked about the patterns that you would see prevailing and the dumbing down of the American people while China and the so-called third world is increasing. And then there's Paul Kennedy, who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers. And then last but not least, there's Sir John Glubb, who wrote The Fate of Empires. And Sir John Glubb outlined the 7 stages of empire. And if you read that essay that he wrote, he did research on it and wrote a brilliant essay. And he's from Britain. And he wrote this in 1976. When you read it, you will see our country. The 7 stages of an empire, from rising to falling. So the word generation, as I will be using it, refers to succeeding population groups. And I'm starting with the teens that was in the 1980s to now. I'm starting with that, but I'm using the word generation to talk about the succeeding generational groups. But I want to focus on that. That was generation, the X generation. And I call that generation the crackhead generation. And the reason I call it that is because of a situation that took place in the United States that you don't read in the history books. There's no studies done on it, no in-depth studies done on it. Our people who are writing the PhD dissertations, brothers and sisters, are not writing things that can be translated into a policy for us. And as a result, we rely on the study of other people in order to try to figure out and put together a policy to help us in our survival. So I'm calling the Generation X the crack generation. They were in their mid to late teens and early 20s in the 1980s. Well, there was an event that took place in the 80s, and it was called the Arms for Hostages. And this was a secret deal that the Reagan administration, so I'm going to talk to you about the crackhead generation so you can understand how we're building up to the curses and how they were implemented in us and how they're passed on. There was a secret deal done by the Ronald Reagan administration in the 1980s, and they sold, are you ready for this? They sold advanced weapons. Are you ready for this? They sold advanced weapons to Iran. And Iran was under a U.S. arms embargo. But the Reagan administration sold arms to Iran to secure the hostages that were being held by Hezbollah. And the goal was to secure the release of the 7 American hostages. They were held in Lebanon. And so here's what happened, and here's how it affects you. This covert operation, which directly contradicted President Reagan's vow, he was vowing to never negotiate with terrorists, it led to a major political scandal known as the Iran-Contra affair. And if you've ever heard the name Ollie North, Lieutenant Colonel Ollie North, that's who was spearheading it and pretty much leading the whole thing. It was called the Iran-Contra affair, and it was arms for hostages. Now, the crisis deepened when it was revealed that the officials diverted profits. Are you ready? They diverted profits from the sale of weapons. So they sold the weapons to Iran. Iran gave them money, and then they took the money to fund the Contra rebels fighting in Nicaragua. And the Contra rebels, another government, the Nicaraguan government with Daniel Ortega, and you notice they always trying to stop them from selling their oil or changing their funds and from the dollar. So that's always a means to overthrow a government. And we always say the troops are fighting for freedom. But they were fighting the Nicaraguan government, who the United States was trying to overthrow. And this was in direct congressional violation of congressional law. And so the drug trade, the crack trade, was connected to the arms for hostages deal through a covert network, which was used to fund the Nicaraguan rebels, or the Contras, I should say. All right. The Reagan administration diverted the profits from the secret weapons sales to Iran to the Contras, and simultaneously, the same operatives that flew the arms shipments into Central America, they were the ones used to smuggle crack cocaine into the United States Black communities. Do you see what happened? So they were smuggling, and it was the smugglers who was taking the money to the Contras and bringing the drugs to the United States. It was the same one. The drug was kept out of the white communities and concentrated into the Black communities over the 80s. I remember That's what devastated Generation X. And that's what produced crack babies and children of crackheads. So the crack babies were diminished, had diminished capacity due to the fact that they were born to a crack addict and their bodies are filled with crack. So the intellect was somewhat diminished. And then those were the crack babies born to crackheads. And then there were the children of the crackheads. Those were children that were born. They weren't born on crack, but they were born in a situation where the whole focus of the parent was to get the next hit of crack. And so the children of the crackheads, y'all need to listen well to this. You need to listen well because you don't know how we got here. And that there was a hand behind the thing. So the children of the crackhead are the millennial generation, born in the 80s, between 1981 and around 94. The oldest millennials are now in their mid 40s today. Those were the children that were the crackheads. The children of the crackheads. We were the crackheads. Our generation was the crackheads. Our children, the millennials, were the children of the crackheads and the crack babies. So you got two generations being worked on here. And so they make up the millennials. And the millennials are now in their mid 40s. The oldest being in the mid 40s. And the youngest being right around 31 or somewhere around there. 30, about 31 to 32. The millennials, now remember, you got Generation X, my generation, crackheads. That's when the government introduced crack into our communities. Our generation were the crackheads. Our millennial children were the crackheads and violent. See, our generation, the Generation X, were crackheads, but not violent. But the children that came behind them were the crackheads and the violent ones. And this is what prompted Clinton, and by the way, Joe Biden. Clinton, who was the first black president, and Joe Biden, this is what caused them to sign this crime bill. And this crime bill gave stiff penalties, stiff prison sentences to crack users as well as crack dealers. And it also prompted the creation or the filling of the American private prison system with black youth at the prime of their lives, and created this enormous private prison industry. This is the one that you voted for. This is the one that was president in the 90s, and the last Democrat president was in the Senate at the same time and was pushing it, and so was Hillary Clinton. So keep in mind that during all these times, Negroes were voting Democrat in massive numbers through the crack years, and this is what was coming at us. And everybody, we're voting Democrat. We're Democrat mayors, Democrat congressmen, Democrat senators, Democrat governors, Democrat this, Democrat that. All that time we were voting Democrat during the crack years. So now the millennials, the men are felons and spent their best years in prison, are coming out of prison, and the women are completely unstable. But they're not talking about those. They pump up the educated group so that you would ignore the crack culture, the group of people that came out of the crack culture. So they pumped them up so that you wouldn't notice it. But there's a problem. So we got the Generation X started out on crack. The crack babies were the millennials. And now the crack babies are having children. And the children of the crack babies are the YNs and horror culture. And they are the grandchildren, the YNs and horror culture are the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the crackhead generation. I know you have a hard time concentrating on things for a while, so I'm going to try to keep it short. But you got to know how we got here. So now the YNs and the horror culture, they are the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of the crackhead generation of the 80s. So all the way through from slavery up to now, a defective software masquerading as us having knowledge and a Trojan horse operating system, sort of like Windows, is being used by us to survive, but in reality, they are precipitating our extinction. So you might ask, what does that have to do with generational and family curses? I've often mentioned in my talks that everything you do is for your survival. And there are 8 dynamics that govern life and manifestation in the material world. There are 8 of them. There are dynamics for survival. And the first 3 dynamics that I'm going to talk about in this lesson and next week's lesson or Sunday's lesson, the first 3 dynamics are the survival as you as an individual, survival as a family or your bloodline, and survival as a group. Now, let me see here. Let me take just a little break here, and I'll be right back. Give me just a moment. I'll be right back.
How could I move the crowd? First of all, ain't no mistakes allowed. Here's the instructions, put it together. It's simple, ain't it? But quite clever. Some of you been trying to write rhymes for years, but we got dares, irritate my ears. Is this the best that you can make? Cause if not, and you got more, I'll wait. But don't make me wait too long, cause I'ma move on the dance floor when they put something smooth on. So turn up the bass, it's better when it's loud. Cause I like to move the crowd.
Now, The second dynamic of survival is you being able to survive as part of a group. And I'm going to zero in on the black racial group, the American black racial group. And what I'm about to say, though I just said the black racial group, don't interpret what I'm about to say as skin color. Because if you do, you're going to miss the principle. It's going to escape you. The principle that I will be trying to illustrate is going to escape you. So try not to think in terms of a group, a racial group. There is a parasitical relationship. There are groups that act as parasites on other groups. And these groups carefully manipulate other groups psychologically, socially, and educationally to attach themselves in a group and live in sort of a symbiotic existence, on another group. They're a parasite. In a symbiotic existence, however, so it's a sort of a symbiotic existence, is an existence where the parasite and the host get a mutual benefit from this arrangement. But the hosts don't get a benefit from the existence or the parasitical symbiotic existence, except the host group gets nothing from the relationship but exploitation. They are exploited until the host group eventually goes extinct. Now, do not think in terms of color for this because it's beyond color. But in the material world, there is a competition between groups. And when the competition between groups are wholesome, then the groups don't destroy each other. But when you have a parasitical group that doesn't bring anything to the relationship, then you will have the type of relationship that is destructive to one group at the same time there's the advancement of another one. And in order for this parasitical relationship to exist, the parasitical group uses misinformation on the host group. You see, they are extracting everything out of the host group. So misinformation is used, rumor is used, superstition is used, and old wives' tales must be cultivated and tolerated in the host group. And so as a result, the host group has no idea of how to function and manifest in the material world. So they don't have any idea of how to use matter, how to use energy, how to use space, and how to use time, because they are completely manipulated and their wealth is sucked out of them without them ever knowing how and why. Thus, if you as a group are steered away from biology, now listen carefully. If you are steered away from biology, steered away from chemistry, steered away from mathematics, steered away from physics, logic, and kept out of the financial pipeline unless it's a church being financed, you can easily be manipulated to think of a friend as an enemy and an enemy as your friend. And even if you receive proof to the contrary of your thinking, because of the manipulation and the programming that has gone on, you will fight to the death to hold the superstition. So let me dive into a curse. A curse, I got 15 minutes and I'll be out of here. A curse is a self-destructive thought or concept imposed on and held in the subconscious mind. Do you see that? A curse is a thought or a concept that you hold in the subconscious mind. It's in the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. It is a thought imposed and held and passed down through generations. So the generation is the generational curse is a saying or a belief passed from one generation to the next generation that causes a very similar experience between each generation. And that's why they call the generational curse. It really is a belief passed down through authority figures on succeeding generations. And so each generation will have the similar experience. See? So curses are imposed on the subconscious mind and perpetuated through generations, through trauma, stress, and unconsciousness. A curse is an energy conjured up by belief. So you're being traumatized, and you can be traumatized as an individual and begin to perpetuate a curse, a family curse. But remember, it's done by belief at the conscious level and a reaction at the subconscious level. So the group can have trauma. You can have, now I said I was going to talk about the group, the family, and the individual, the family, and the group. The group can have trauma. And the trauma will instill a curse in the mind of the group. It's like when the entire group, here's an example. An entire group witnessed the killing of George Floyd live. And the talk of it can happen to you. That's a trauma inflicted on you and a thought deposited in you. And as a result of this trauma inflicted on you, up under stress, it's a traumatic situation. Another example is like the stress which comes to a parent for having to give their sons the talk. And you know what the talk is. It can come from unconsciousness. Someone in your family becomes unconscious for whatever reason and suffers a thought in their mind that's projected, that's put there as a curse, a thought, a belief. And then that authority figure passes that thought and belief on not only through speech, but through DNA and biological reactions. And so the entire family starts to believe this, and generation after generation believes it and acts on it. Here's another one, another example. Do you notice that most of our families have to start over? Do you notice that generational wealth is never passed on in the majority of our families? And so there's a belief that I got it, so they're going to have to work to get their own. And as a result, we don't pass on generational wealth. We pass generational curses, because we're passing that thought to each succeeding generation. And it's a belief at the conscious level. But it can take on a biological reaction and a chemical reaction and a subconscious planting. It can be planted in your subconscious, and there are procedures that's available that can help us extract them. But like I said earlier, they can make the parasite has an interest in your ignorance staying in place. So your enemy can be thought of as a friend, and your friend can be thought of as an enemy. So when I mention the friend that you have been cultivated to think of as an enemy, you react. In spite that research results can be shown to you that this cures the situation. So the parasite specializes in keeping us in a constant state of stress. All the time, the black man and woman is under a constant state of stress just because of the race. And our experts warned us about the possibility. Well, let me tell you, this is from Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch warned them about letting certain knowledge come to them because the possibility of a phenomenon occurring because the mind, listen, the mind has a strong drive to correct itself and recorrect itself over a period of time. If you were left alone, if we were left alone, our minds would correct themselves. Our minds, because you're naturally the children of God, and your mind naturally goes to God. Your mind naturally, if you were left alone, your mind would correct itself. And so Willie Lynch warned the slave masters that the mind has a drive to correct itself over a period of time. I got proof for you. When our forefathers were left out of slavery, they built about 64 towns on their own, segregated. They were left alone. And the first thing they did was start to find their families. And at first, the family structure was a blended family. You had a man with children from a relationship and a woman with children from a relationship because they were being breeded like that. But they went and found their family and began to put blended families. Of course, it wasn't called blended families. They began to put blended families together. And after a while, listen, after a while, the family structure became what's called a traditional family. Mother, father, children of the same parents. They were not being taught by white folk. They were segregated, and they were building towns and banks and schools and all the things of a civilized society. They were doing it without the help of the society. In fact, they were doing it in spite of being put down by the society. And when we integrated, our families and our situation looked just like it looked in slavery. So Willie Lynch says that you can't let them think. You got to supply all the doctrines, the education, the ways that they can go in their occupation. You have to carefully manipulate it because the mind has a strong drive to correct itself over a period of time if it can touch a substantial, original, historical base. It would do that. Your mind would do that. And they advised them that the best way to deal with that phenomenon is to shave off his mental history and create a multiplicity of phenomena of illusions. Listen, Willie Lynch said to keep them from touching the God level of thought, you got to keep them orbiting in a multiplicity of illusion so that their problem solving would always be touching and reaching for and trying to, if we solve this, this will happen. And they try to solve it and it never happens. Nothing ever happens. A multiplicity, meaning a whole lot of illusions. Each illusion twirls on its own axis and keeping them about a multiplicity of illusion. This was Willie Lynch. And so what he means by each illusion orbits on its own axis, keep them all in silos. I'm doing something, you doing something, he doing something, she doing something. But they never come together because they're all in individual silos. They're not comparing notes. They don't have a sense of community to where the silos are broken down and they're able to work together and each can bring his talent to the situation, which would actually be the key for the other situation. Keep them in a multiplicity of illusion. Keep them all working in separate silos. I got an education. We are the most educated people in America. This is a silo. I don't want to go 50-50. That's a silo. I live over here. You live over there. I'm better. That's a silo. The lawyers and the doctors in segregated America were the neighbors next door. The teacher, you knew the teacher. The church was owned by the community, and that's what made Martin Luther King so strong, because the church wasn't a family business as it is today. It ain't nothing but a family business. Keep them in chaos by bringing doubt to the idea of truth. And so you have them running around talking about my truth, your truth, his truth, her truth. See, you cause them to doubt that there is a truth, and how you experience truth is simply the differences. But the truth is one. The truth is the same. And this is the first law of chaos that they're bringing to you. The first law of chaos, you ain't never heard this. The first law of chaos, see, they know truth is one. This is why they can function as a unit, have differences, and still function as a unit. They're not in silos. You are. And the first law of chaos says that truth is not the same for everyone. And that's why they say my truth, her truth, his truth, her truth. You are made to believe, this is what Willie Lynch taught, that truth is a variable. Here's an example. I got one for you. I'm a little embarrassed about it, but I'm going to tell you. Truth is a variable, or you're in a situation where you just having a hard time believing something is true, in spite of the evidence and the mathematics. So I studied physics in college, and I remember my first year. I carried around when we were studying gravitational forces. I carried around a golf ball and a paper wad, a balled up piece of paper tightly in my pocket. And it was so difficult for me to believe that a brick and a feather under the force of gravity falls with the same acceleration, that I would often stand there and hold the paper wad and the golf ball at the same height and drop them at the same time. I did it often because it was so hard to believe that. In spite of that, I could derive the fact of it mathematically. In spite of the fact that I was free to do experiments on it, it took a long time to get out of the chaotic thinking. And I thought it just was difficult to believe. So here's another example of chaos, the law of chaos. You can find the law of chaos being used in the Bible. So there's this story of Adam and Eve in this garden. And I can't go into the whole story of how the first God was telling them they can eat everything, but in chapter 1 of Genesis. But in chapter 2 of Genesis, there's this Garden of Eden story, and there's this tree of the knowledge of good and evil placed at the center of the garden. And the God tells them, you can eat of every tree, you can eat of anything in this garden except the one that's in the middle of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he says that if you eat this from this tree, you are going to surely die. And I'll go into that next week when I handle Willie Lynch. You're going to surely die. So what was this tree? This tree had both good and evil on it. And it was talking about the nature. It's a symbol. Now, let me help you to understand this. Jesus said in the New Testament that if your eye be single, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye be evil, your whole body will be filled with darkness. And if the light that is in you be dark, how great is that darkness? Now, how can light be dark? See, these are mystery. He spoke in parables to be opened up in this day. So think of single and evil that Jesus compared, and then go back to this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So everything has a single nature. The nature of an apple tree is apples. The nature of an orange tree is oranges. You will not see an apple tree produce oranges. The apple tree is only going to produce from its single nature. But if you hang an orange on an apple tree and put that tree in the middle of this garden where they got to walk past it every day and notice that, wow, this is the apple tree, but I notice it's growing oranges on there too. What's happening is the truth is being compromised, that the truth is not true. Because I see this apple tree with oranges on it. Do you understand? The single nature can only produce the single thing. And as is said, Jesus taught in the New Testament, a good tree brings forth good fruit. He wasn't talking about ain't none of it just kind of rotten a little bit, overripened. He wasn't saying that it was bad, but he says a good tree brings forth good fruit, and an evil tree, notice, brings forth evil fruit. Now you either make the tree good or you make the tree evil. So this tree in the garden is a tree that has the nature of one fruit, but bears two fruit. And it was designed to get them to compromise the nature of truth, that truth is a variable and not true. And he said, if you eat it, you're going to surely die. This is Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. So Willie Lynch understood that, because he says in the beginning of the Willie Lynch letter that he got this from the King James Bible. So he says again, and I'll wrap it up with this and we'll pick it up again on Sunday. Both the male and the female must be taught to respond to a particular new language. This new language is a slave language. So you keep repeating through the media. You keep calling them poor. You keep calling them disadvantaged. You have language that keeps producing this psychology in them. And this will cause these family curses. Now, one other point, you can also find that example in the Bible. See, Willie Lynch started teaching them a slave language, how they going to communicate. You call him boy. You call her a heifer or a wench, and get them to think of themselves as that. But it's against their nature. They want to respond, but their nature want to respond, but because of the situation, the controlled environment, responding meant death at their hands. So in the Bible, you see this situation where he needs to divide the male from the female, just like Willie Lynch did. And so he says, how can I divide them? I know, I'm going to get him to name the animals. So he takes these cursed animals, they're already cursed. And you can see this when he curses the serpent. I'm going to curse you above the rest of the animals. So you see that the animals were already cursed, and the curse was division. The curse was the lack of the knowledge of truth. And so he marches these animals past this united male and female, and they're looking at it, and they're one while they're doing this. And it says, so you can name them. And whatsoever Adam named them, that's what he called them. He was setting up the language, the control language. And so it says, it's a narration, it says, so each one of the animals had a mate, but there was no mate to be found for Adam. But they were one. And soon as he said that, he put them to sleep. And that's when you get the operation of separating the female from the male, taking her off somewhere and teaching her something else, and then bringing her back to the male. And they're walking around doing their thing, and because she realized that this character that separated her and taught her did not give her wisdom. And so when the serpent came and started talking to her, she knew she didn't have the wisdom that she should have had as a female. And it was good for food. Why was it good for food? Because the God in chapter 1 said you can eat from every tree. This is Willie Lynch. And you don't know it because you have an enemy relationship with the truth. You're unwilling to ask questions and let it stand on its own. You got to bolster it up and make it right. So you use the language. It's the word of God. It's the word of God. It's the word of God. I go by the word of God. You've never tested it. You don't know if it's the word of God or not. You've never tested it. You've never let it stand on its own. And so the naming of the animals was not a privilege, but a manipulation to get the slave language down pat for them. He needed them to work in his garden. That's what they were brought there for, and that's what they were being used to do and developed to do. And when they did something else and their eyes were open, he kicked them out of the garden. He said, well, you are going to work for me in the place that I found you, but you ain't getting away. You still going to work for me. So this psychological language is through every institution, brothers and sisters, including the church, including the schools, including the government, including the society, to plant them curses in your mind. I am out of here today.
As a sister, as a black woman, as an African, as a philanthropist, as a struggler, I stand today here with you, and I recognize that this is the beginning of the new world. This is the beginning of the new world. As we stand together, I weep. I weep for my family because I know that tears bring joy. And I know that this is the beginning of the freedom of all the slaves and the slave masters. I weep for my people because I know that tears bring joy. This is the beginning of the freedom of the slaves and the slave masters. Thank you.
It's easy for us to place it all on Donald Trump's shoulders. It's easy for us to place Pittsburgh on his shoulders. It's easy for me to place Charlottesville on his shoulders. It's easy for us to place El Paso on his shoulders. This is us. And if we're going to get past this, we can't blame it on him. He's a manifestation of the ugliness that's in us.
How long are you going to sit around begging white people to do for us what we have the power to do for ourselves?
And I feel it and see it every day. And every black man watching this show know you are enemies. And you have the nerve to stand up here and say Elijah Muhammad's poison in my mind. He cannot teach us that you are enemy. You taught us, and your people daily.